Okay folks, welcome to the silver locket repair video. So the next thing to do is to make another ring for the other locket and a slightly bigger ring for the Art Nouveau locket. Now these two were made with 1mm silver, and the Art Nouveau locket is going to be made with 1.2mm, which is a little bit thicker for a watch fob. Okay, so here we now have the three pieces ready, and it's now off to the soldering den to solder these. That one, by the way, is not attached. And so essentially, just to reiterate, we've basically made a jump ring with a flat on it for this, and you can see why, because it's got a flat top. And for this, and they're from 1mm silver wire, and then we've made a jump ring for this, which fits into the curve at the top there, which is not flatted off, and that's made from 1.2mm silver, which is slightly thicker. And so now we're going to go off and we're going to solder these, and I'm going to use easy solder, which is the lower temperature solder, which melts before the hard solder melts, essentially, because the hard solder was used to make the rings with. And I'm going to do that because when you get all the pieces like this, you're not really quite sure what they made them with. So when you're repairing something, you have to be a little bit careful that you don't overheat the piece and it just flops into a pile of bits. Okay, so here is the locket now, set up for soldering. And this is the little ring. And there's a stack of brass chips in which the ring is sitting. There is a gap between the brass chip and the locket so that the ring doesn't stick to the brass chips and the brass chip doesn't stick to the locket. But the ring is pushed up against the locket, and it's been stuck with easy solder paste, which is the lowest temperature solder paste. Okay, now the locket itself has been piled up, and I'll just try and show you that a little bit. There you go. You can see the brass chips. So it's all been done very carefully. It looks a bit haphazard, but it's actually been done very carefully. And the locket's doesn't open flat completely, so it's been propped up itself on some brass chips so that you can get the new bail flat flush with it. Okay, and that's now going to go for some of the. Okay, so here I've actually set up the Art Nouveau fob. There's a pile of brass chips under the bail. It's got easy solder connecting it together, which hasn't been blowtorched yet. There's also some brass chips underneath the actual body of the item as well, to prop it up to the right level. Now the brass chips have been kept away from the actual solder area, so effectively you won't get the brass sticking to the solder. Now this is the alternative way to set up the lockets themselves. You can see the bail that we made there, which has been pushed up against the locket with easy solder, and there's a brass chip propping it up to the right height just next to it, and I've done the other one here just the same way. The brass doesn't touch the solder, and the brass doesn't touch anywhere near the joint or the connection. There's a gap, as you can see there. So this will now be torched so that the solder melts and sticks the bail. Okay folks, welcome to the soldering den. I'm just going to show you roughly how to solder one of these lockets. Now what you do is you start with the body of the locket, and you turn your flame down so that it's not ferocious, otherwise you will melt the piece. Okay, so you start with the body of the locket, get it hot enough that the solder can melt, and you can see it changing colour there, the metal. And when it starts to get hotter, you bring the soldering iron round to where the bail is, and make sure that the solder melts right on the surface. So we'll heat this one up. If you were to heat up the bail end first, what will happen is the bail will get red hot because it's not connected to the main body of the locket, and what will then happen is it'll essentially melt, and your job will be ruined. So let's try this one here. When you're soldering with a torch like this, you should always keep the torch moving. Never let it settle in one place for too long, otherwise the silver, especially on the older thinner pieces like this, it will scorch and you end up with a big hole. Right, so there we have it all soldered. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is essentially the pickle, which cleans up the fire stain from the silver. So what we have here, if you have a look at, you can see how the silver's gone slightly bronzy colour, like brown and bronzy. That's not because it's made of brass or anything like that, that's because it's got fire stain on it, essentially. If you look at this one here, a bit of bronziness at the top there. In about half an hour to an hour or so, that fire stain will be removed. Okay, so after they come out of the pickle tank, this is what they look like, and I've added some rings to these, and we're now going to solder the rings. Okay, all three lockets have now got jump rings on, and I'm just going to demonstrate quickly how to solder one of these. Firstly, put a bit of flux on it, and then you put a bit of solder onto it, and it's usually easy solder so that you don't have to get the piece too hot, like so. Now I just need to point out here that essentially when the piece is hanging like this, it can't really transfer much heat to the pendant itself, and so it tends to heat up very quickly, and so you have to just watch what you're doing. But it's quite a good technique because it means that you can solder things when they're attached to quite delicate items. So here goes with the solder. So that's soldered perfectly. Just to show you how we did this, this is just a micro torch that's used for soldering rings. And that concludes the locket repair video. Thanks for watching, folks.